The observatory clung to the jagged cliffs of Vexus Prime, a lonely outpost at the edge of Andromeda, where twin suns bled violet and gold across the horizon. Inside, the air buzzed faintly with the hum of energy conduits, a constant reminder that life, if one could call it that, thrived even in isolation. Zylar's elongated fingers hovered above the console, trembling not from fear, but from anticipation. For weeks he had dismissed the faint patterns as random cosmic noise, an anomaly of an unstable sector. Yet tonight, the signals pulsed with deliberate rhythm, shifting subtly in ways that suggested intelligence, strategy, purpose. He leaned closer, tracing the lines of light across the holographic interface. The patterns were not just complex, they were layered, encoded with what could only be tests. They were waiting for someone to notice, someone to respond. They're real, he whispered to the empty room, the sound almost swallowed by the machinery around him. Humans. They're coming. The word felt foreign on his tongue. Yet, true, humanity had been relegated to myth. Stories whispered across the galaxy. Some told of a species that had survived catastrophes that would have ended empires. Tales of ingenuity and stubbornness so potent, it had become legend. Most dismissed them as bedtime stories, moral parables for alien children. But Zylar had seen the evidence, and the evidence did not lie. The signal carried subtle traps, tests embedded within it, designed to see if anyone was clever enough to notice, patient enough to understand. And Zylar was certain of one terrifying fact. The galaxy was completely unprepared for what was coming. Beyond the observatory's reinforced windows, the sector stretched endlessly, a dark tapestry of stars and drifting nebulae. Ice asteroids floated silently, reflecting faint sunlight, and derelict vessels drifted like ghosts, remnants of civilizations that had over. Zylar's lab was filled with spinning holographic star maps, vectors of movement, and simulated flight paths. He traced the signal's origin with meticulous care, noting how it shifted, almost as if guiding him toward comprehension. Each layer revealed intent. Each frequency pulsed with the unmistakable rhythm of intelligence. This was not a random cosmic occurrence. It was a message, deliberately sent to be discovered. He activated the Council comlink, his antennae twitching nervously, as he transmitted across light. Council of Vexus, this is Zylar the humans. They are not myth. I can track them. Their fleet approaches. Silence met him, then derision. Zylar, your obsession blinds you, a councillor's voice sneered, cold and unyielding. Legends are not real. Focus on the known threats. Zylar's thoughts swirled, frantic. Focus. How could he focus when the very legends he had devoted his life to were alive? How could he convince a galaxy that myths had teeth, and that those teeth were sharp and waiting? Far from Vexus Prime, humans moved like shadows among the stars. The flagship, the Aegis, cut through space with silent precision, a dark silhouette against the glittering void. Admiral Kale stood at the bridge, eyes scanning the data streams, mind calculating probabilities with unnerving clarity. Humans did not move to dominate in the way the galaxy understood domination. They moved to survive, to test, to show that intelligence and adaptability could be weapons as formidable as any cannon. Every hand, every interface, every maneuver was coordinated with deliberate unpredictability. Dr. Ilyra Vaughn monitored alien communications, noting the confusion spreading through the Outer Rim patrols. Fleets were misdirected, installations malfunctioned, signals looped into false territories, and Zylar watched it all with growing awe and unease. Humans were not merely powerful, they were an entirely different paradigm. Reports filtered back to the Council. Yet still, they scoffed. Fleets disabled without a single shot fired. Orbital platforms rendered useless by subtle manipulations of physics and strategy. Zylar's warnings fell on deaf ears, and frustration gnawed at him. Meanwhile, the humans probed the contested system. At the edge of the sector, rich with minerals coveted by multiple alien factions, they moved with stealth, using asteroid belts and nebulae to mask their presence, leaving behind traps that seemed innocent but were lethal in their subtlety. Each alien attack that failed, each strategy, outmaneuvered, increased the tension. The humans' genius was not in their technology alone, it was in their psychology, their ability to anticipate, to improvise, and to act with moral restraint even in the chaos of survival. Zylar felt it in his core. He had dedicated his life to studying humanity, to proving their existence, and now that proof was before him, overwhelming and undeniable. He realized with a mix of terror and wonder that myths could not merely inspire, they could terrify, and the humans were no myth. They were alive, adaptive, and far beyond the Council's imagination. The first direct confrontation came near a dense nebula, where alien admirals, overconfident in their fleets, believed they had cornered the humans. Plasma cannons flared, lighting the darkness with sudden, violent brilliance. Zylar's sensors recorded minimal damage. Then, from the shadow of the nebula, human ships emerged. Silent, precise, untouchable. Mines deployed with surgical timing, disarmed engines. Countermeasures rendered communications useless. The aliens realized too late that their every expectation had been anticipated, every assumption manipulated. The humans' weaknesses, the very vulnerabilities the Council had been told to watch for, were deliberate bait. The humans were teaching, not killing. They were showing the galaxy a lesson in strategy and morality alike. Zylar's mind raced with a moral dilemma. Should he warn the Council fully, risking a war that might decimate entire star systems? Or side with the humans, bridging understanding between species? The choice weighed on him like gravity itself. Humanity had returned, and with it came a challenge not just of firepower, but of ethics and foresight. The humans, through Dr. Vaughn, communicated terms: coexistence, respect, cooperation, but with a warning: underestimate them, and consequences would follow, not from cruelty, but from inevitability. The nebula cleared, revealing the aftermath. Alien fleets had retreated, humbled, awestruck. Zylar transmitted a final, trembling message: humans are real. Adapt, or perish. On the bridge of the Aegis, Kale watched the stars, calm and unshaken. Ilyra approached silently, no words necessary. Humans had returned not to conquer, but to remind the galaxy of what myths could become when they walked out of the shadows. The camera would pan outward, revealing the human armada glimmering against the darkness, a constellation of deliberate brilliance. Zylar's whisper echoed in the observatory. Perhaps myths are not stories. Perhaps they are warnings. The stars themselves seemed to listen, carrying the truth across the void, into every corner of the galaxy, unprepared for what was coming. An eerie stillness hung over the council chamber, as Ambassador Threx's last words echoed through the marble halls. If humans exist, they are already the end of us. His voice was sharp, accusing, and yet tinged with disbelief, as if he could not fully grasp the terror he had just spoken aloud. Captain Ilyra of the Dravari Empire listened silently, her sharp eyes scanning the faces of her peers, reading arrogance, fear, and the faint stirrings of panic. She had been tasked with charting the outer rim for potential threats, but nothing in her years of service had prepared her for this. Humans, long relegated to myth and propaganda, had appeared not as whispers or stories, but as cold, calculated reality. Her discovery began with a system that had been overlooked in every prior survey, a quiet pocket at the edge of Dravari, space where human-built satellites orbited in perfect geometric patterns. They were small, almost unassuming, but they moved with a purpose that unsettled even her seasoned mind. Ilyra crouched over her station, analyzing the signals. Each satellite rotated, adjusted, and transmitted in ways that suggested strategy, communication, and intelligence. The humans were not passive observers. They were already thinking 3 steps ahead. The room around her seemed to blur as she contemplated the implications. Commander Reeve, a human officer, watched from the bridge of their lead ship. The resolute, his posture calm yet alert. His eyes reflected a mind trained to anticipate, to manipulate perception without cruelty, to test and prod rather than destroy, recklessly. Beside him, Dr. Lumia, a Dravari scientist assigned to assist Ilyra, felt unease twist into curiosity. She had always trusted the Empire's doctrines, the tales of humans as brutal, unpredictable creatures. But this was different. The satellites didn't threaten. They observed. They waited. They learned. Ilyra's inner monologue struggled between disbelief and necessity. We have spent centuries dismissing myths, erasing stories as propaganda, claiming humanity extinct. Yet here they are, calculating, patient, invisible until they choose to reveal themselves. How many fleets have we already underestimated? How many mistakes have we already made because we failed to consider the impossible? The humans' first maneuver unfolded with unnerving subtlety. They allowed Ilyra's patrol to detect a single fleet, seemingly unprotected, almost as if offering a target. The Dravari response was immediate, a surge of confidence coursing through the crews. Yet every move they made, every attempt to engage, was anticipated. Gravitational anomalies were exploited. Communications loops lured ships into false coordinates. Each victory the Dravari imagined evaporated like mist. Ilyra's heart pounded as the realization set in. They were being taught a lesson in strategy, not punished for failure. Reeves' voice cut through the tension aboard the Resolute, calm and deliberate. "Patience is a weapon," he said softly. "They will test us. They will probe our weaknesses. And we will let them see what they expect to see." The irony of it, nor did Ilyra, her fleet, so meticulously trained, so confident in its superiority, was falling into traps that were not predicated on firepower, but on human ingenuity. The humans' advantage was not technology. They had less than the Empire but adaptability, creativity, and psychological insight. Each maneuver was a puzzle designed to provoke thought, to expose assumptions, to measure the Dravari mindset against an entirely foreign standard. Suspense built with every encounter. Humans appeared near black holes, using their distortions to mask movement. They slipped between asteroid belts, almost ghost-like, leaving alien patrols scrambling in confusion. Each engagement was a chess match in 3 dimensions, a symphony of strategy where the Dravari were blind to half the instruments. Lumia's skepticism began to falter, replaced by awe and fear. She could no longer cling to the propaganda of a violent, thoughtless species. Humans were deliberate, precise, and terrifying in their subtlety. The first direct confrontation arrived, not with firepower, but with patience. The humans orchestrated a gravitational snare, a trap so precise that multiple alien fleets were caught in orbit, unable to maneuver without risking collision. Plasma volleys were ineffective. Engines jammed with uncanny timing. Ilyra's inner voice screamed in disbelief. "This is impossible. How could a species thought extinct manipulate space itself with such precision?" Her own command instincts were challenged, her rigid moral code strained as she faced the impossible choice: follow the Empire's orders and risk annihilation, or acknowledge the human's brilliance and rethink everything she believed. Twists emerged with every layer of the engagement. Lumia, driven by curiosity and moral reasoning, began covertly assisting the humans, feeding subtle insights that allowed them to anticipate the Dravari responses. Reeves' approach was deliberate, offering calculated weaknesses to lure the Empire into overcommitment, revealing that their perceived advantage was part of the humans' strategy all along. The humans were not simply outmaneuvering their enemies, they were teaching, probing, testing the ethics and intelligence of the civilizations around them. Tension escalated as Ilyra faced the ultimate moral and strategic dilemma. Her crews were exhausted, her fleets stretched, her pride and duty to the Empire in conflict with the stark reality of the humans' superiority. Every instinct screamed to attack, yet every observation whispered restraint. The human strength lay not in domination, but in the ability to provoke thought, to impose moral consequences without violence. Ilyra realized she was standing at the precipice of a revelation. Humanity's myth had been understated. They were not conquerors. They were the embodiment of adaptability, strategy, and moral foresight. The climax came as the humans executed a synchronized maneuver that trapped multiple alien fleets in a gravitational web near a dying star. Engines failed. Ships drifted helplessly. Panic surged through the Dravari admirals as they realized that victory had been an illusion, carefully orchestrated to demonstrate that sheer aggression could be countered with patience, intellect, and ingenuity. Lumia's defection became critical in preventing catastrophic missteps, a testament to the humans' ability to inspire reflection, even in a species raised on hatred and propaganda. As the dust settled, Ilyra surveyed the remnants of her fleet, stunned into respect. The humans had not destroyed, they had educated. They had exposed arrogance and hubris, and they had done so without unnecessary bloodshed. Reeves' calm presence aboard the Resolute was the embodiment of their ethos: morality, ingenuity, and the quiet assertion that myths, when realized, could redefine the balance of power across the galaxy. Finally, the humans offered terms through Dr. Vaughn: coexistence, collaboration, understanding, and respect. It was not a surrender in the traditional sense. It was an invitation for a civilization to evolve beyond fear, to recognize that survival was not merely dominance but intelligence tempered with conscience. Ilyra's inner thoughts swirled with reluctant admiration. We feared what we did not understand. We dismissed what we could not grasp. And yet here they stand, proving that legends are more than stories. They're standards by which we measure ourselves. The final image lingered in her mind. Human ships moving in perfect formation against the void, silhouettes of ingenuity and quiet authority, a constellation of deliberate brilliance. The Outer Rim had witnessed the arrival of humanity, and the galaxy would never be the same. What had been myth was now reality, and with it came the sobering lesson that history, propaganda, and fear could never prepare a species for the impossible. Ilyra breathed deeply, realizing that in the shadows of human ingenuity, her entire understanding of the galaxy, her strategies, her morality, had been tested and found wanting. She whispered silently to herself, a blend of awe, fear, and respect. We are not ready, but perhaps we can learn. The camera would drift outward, past shattered fleets and distant stars, to show the humans' coordinated fleet glimmering in the darkness, a silent testament to adaptability, intellect, and moral precision. And as the nebulae shimmered faintly against the void, the message became clear. Myths can return, and when they do not forgive ignorance or arrogance. The ruins drifted silently in the void, a fractured testament to a civilization long thought extinct. The planet, scarred and blackened, rotated lazily in its orbit, its atmosphere a thin veil of ash and dust. Admiral Threx maneuvered his scavenger fleet around the desolate world, sensors picking up faint energy readings that hinted at life, for at least remnants of it. Years of legend had convinced most that humans were gone, their colonies destroyed, their ingenuity lost to history. Yet here was proof that they had existed, and the traces were more intricate than he could have imagined. Threx's claws tightened over the controls as he guided his flagship closer. Derelict starports floated, like ghostly teeth around the equator, metal twisted and burned from some past calamity. He felt a shiver of apprehension. Something about this sight unsettled him, not just the evidence of human survival, but the sense that the planet was a lure, a test for anyone who dared to investigate too closely. His thoughts were interrupted by the flicker of a distant energy signature, small and deliberate. Approaching from hyperjump. Captain Saren emerged from the shimmer of the warp corridor, leading a fleet of human ships that moved like shadows across the void. Unlike the scattered scavenger fleet, they were precise, deliberate, and terrifyingly synchronized. Threx's senses, trained on every anomaly, struggled to interpret their formations. The humans had not come to negotiate. They had come to assert control with subtlety and efficiency. Saren's voice carried across the comms, calm but firm. This is not a challenge without reason. Stand down, and your losses will be minimized. Resist, and the consequences are your own. Threx hesitated. His mind wrestled with a mixture of fear and respect. He had hunted civilizations before, exploiting weakness and chaos. Yet these humans were unlike anything he had encountered. They did not rely on overwhelming firepower alone. Instead, their strength lay in adaptation, in ingenuity, in the ability to turn the environment itself into a weapon. Mines were not placed randomly. They appeared where the scavenger fleet would most likely maneuver. Energy pulses disrupted communications before attacks could be coordinated. Every movement was anticipated. The first confrontation came at a ruined orbital station. Threx ordered an attack, confident that sheer numbers would overwhelm the humans. Plasma cannons flared against the shadow of the Resolute and its escorting ships, but the humans had already calculated the engagement. Energy fields phased at precisely the right moments to deflect the majority of fire, while decoy drones lured several scavenger cruisers into traps. Ships were immobilized, engines seized by silent, invisible forces that Threx could not identify. Panic rippled through his crews as chaos replaced confidence. The humans had not fired a single destructive shot. They had turned strategy into a weapon. Saren's calm, deliberate guidance of his fleet contrasted with Threx's growing desperation. Dr. Ilyra, a human anthropologist embedded on the flagship, observed the aliens with detached curiosity. Her thoughts were measured, analytical. They believe humans are myths. They fear what they do not understand. And yet we are teaching them, guiding them through the consequences of arrogance without cruelty. Each calculated move was not merely tactical, it was a lesson. A mare held to the scavenger fleet's moral and strategic flaws. As the humans pressed their maneuvers, Threx faced an ethical dilemma that gnawed at him. He had long justified preemptive strikes and exploitation as necessary for survival. But this was different. Humanity's return forced him to question his methods, his morality, and the very definitions of strength and victory. He watched as a human vessel phased through a nebula, using gravitational currents to immobilize his flagship for a tense moment. The display was almost artistic, yet lethal in its precision. Every human action combined subtlety, patience, and moral restraint in a way that Threx could not comprehend fully. Suspense mounted as the humans began environmental manipulation, turning ruined landscapes into tactical assets. Asteroids shifted silently, becoming shields and weapons. Derelict stations were reactivated remotely, creating false targets that drew the scavenger fleet into traps. Each misstep by Threx and its commanders seemed orchestrated to highlight the human superiority not just in technology, but in perception and adaptability. Every failed strike was an emotional blow, a psychological pressure meant to dismantle confidence and arrogance without unnecessary slaughter. Threx's inner monologue became increasingly frantic. Are we the hunters or the hunted? These humans survive not because of brute strength, but because they see beyond brute strength. They anticipate, they adapt, and worse, they are ethical. They do not kill unless necessary. They do not destroy for glory. They are exceptional. The realization sank like a weight into his mind. Humanity was alive, not as myth, not as the ghost stories of centuries past, but as a force capable of reshaping the galaxy's understanding of power and morality. The humans' tactics escalated further, culminating in a fleet-wide maneuver that disrupted the scavenger supply lines and immobilized several warships. Mines deployed with surgical precision, countermeasures disabled communications, leaving the scavenger commanders disoriented and vulnerable. Each step demonstrated that humans relied on ingenuity, improvisation, and careful observation rather than overwhelming force. The moral arc of the confrontation became clear. Strength without strategy was nothing, and morality without intelligence was blind. Humans had achieved both. Serene and Dr. Kyra coordinated a final engagement, subtle yet devastating, using environmental anomalies, gravitational fields, and synchronized fleet movements. They turned the scavenger fleet's aggression against itself. Threx realized, in horror, that the humans had anticipated every conceivable move, and yet they had chosen not to annihilate him completely. The lesson was not vengeance, it was restraint, teaching, and the assertion that survival demanded more than weapons. Threx's internal conflict reached its peak. He had prepared for a confrontation with a myth, expecting chaos and violence. Instead, he encountered precision, morality, and the power of adaptability. The human's ethical choices forced him to reflect on his own actions. Could he continue to exploit, deceive, and destroy without consequence? Were the legends of humanity not only true, but aspirational in ways he could not emulate? The answer weighed heavily upon him, reshaping his understanding of honor, duty, and survival. Finally, as the nebula cleared and the human fleet prepared to depart, Threx watched the ships drift silently into the void, a constellation of calculated brilliance. Captain Saren's message echoed across the communications array. We are not your destroyers. We are your mirrors. Learn, adapt, or be left behind. The words carried moral weight, a reminder that humanity's strength was not only in what they could do, but in what they chose not to do. The camera would pull back, drifting past the ruined planet, past immobilized ships, past the asteroid, fields and derelict stations, to reveal the human fleet moving with silent purpose, glimmering against the darkness like stars aligned with intent. Threx's whisper echoed faintly in the corridors of his flagship. Perhaps the legends were never about destruction. Perhaps they were warnings, lessons, and a challenge we were never prepared to face. The void itself seemed to hold its breath, carrying the silent truth across the galaxy. Humans had survived, they had returned, and myths were never idle stories. They were standards by which all others would now be measured. Vaalis had always been fascinated by myths. From the moment he could read, he collected every story, every whisper of humans told across countless civilizations. In classrooms, taverns, and council halls, alien children spoke of humans as giants, unstoppable warriors, creatures of ingenuity that could bend the universe to their will. To most, it was entertainment, a way to teach morals, courage, and respect for the unknown. But to Vaalis, it was an obsession. Every story hinted at truths buried beneath legend, a civilization so exceptional that it could not be fully understood, even when described in myth. Tonight, he sat alone in the archives of the great library of Jabberis, surrounded by holographic records and faded manuscripts, trying to map the inconsistencies. His mind raced, connecting fragments from centuries of tales, searching for patterns. Every story is different. Every account exaggerates, yet there's a consistency, A rhythm. The humans were real, weren't they? And if they are, why have they vanished? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft ping, a subtle energy signature registering on his interface. He froze, recognizing the pattern immediately. Humans were near. Not as myth, not as stories, but as tangible, deliberate presence. The historian's heart raced as he pieced it together. Humans had never truly disappeared. They had moved in shadows, shaping the galaxy subtly, influencing wars, diplomacy, and civilizations with precision that went unnoticed for generations. Vaalis realized with a mix of awe and terror that the myths he had spent his life cataloging were not mere exaggerations, they were incomplete accounts of reality. And now, humans were approaching, not with conquest, but with intent, far more profound. Human envoy Mara appeared first. Not as a fleet, but as a single observation craft that drifted above Javari's orbital hub. Her presence was quiet, deliberate, and commanding. Vaalis could see her intelligence in every careful movement, her calm demeanor contrasting with the fear and excitement rippling through the city below. Mara did not demand allegiance, nor did she threaten. She was a reminder, a living testament to the power of legends realized. General Keith, commander of the local defense fleet, was less impressed. His jaw tightened as he watched the human craft hover silently. They are myths, stories. How can one vessel command such attention? His pride and fear collided, leaving him unprepared for the subtle brilliance of human strategy. Mara's craft did not attack, did not display aggression. Yet the tension it generated was palpable. Every citizen, every soldier, every scholar felt the arrival of a force that could not be measured by firepower alone. Vaalis, torn between career ambition and the moral weight of truth, began to document every interaction, every subtle influence. Humans exerted. Mara's mission was not domination. It was balance. Humans had a history of intervening only when necessary, nudging civilizations away from catastrophe, testing leaders and populations to see if they could navigate complexity without external coercion. They do not conquer, they educate. They do not destroy, they guide. The historian felt awe ripple through him as he realized the profound responsibility humans wielded silently. Suspense mounted as Vaalis tracked subtle movements across the galaxy. Human ships appeared in contested regions, not as invaders, but as observers, subtly influencing outcomes without revealing their full strength. Political disputes, trade conflicts, even minor skirmishes shifted under their quiet touch. They were ghostly arbiters of morality and strategy, acting as both challenge and warning. Vaalis documented every encounter, his fingers trembling over the controls. Every action, every subtle nudge, was a lesson cloaked in invisibility. Keith, initially dismissive, began to experience the human's influence firsthand. Drills and simulations that had previously been simple exercises became complex puzzles, subtly altered by human tactics. Resources were redirected in ways that exposed weaknesses, forcing him to rethink strategies and command philosophy. The emotional tension between fear, respect, and awe grew, culminating in a near confrontation that Mara diffused with precision and calm. No shots were fired, yet the lesson was clear. Humans did not need to wield destruction to assert dominance. Their intellect and moral discernment were sufficient. Vaalis observed the humans' fleet appearing from nebulous shadows, each ship moving like a shadow against the stars. Citizens on the planetary surface looked skyward, eyes wide in disbelief. As myths materialized into reality, humans were graceful in their presence, yet every action radiated authority. It was not a spectacle of fear, it was an exhibition of deliberate restraint and careful moral consideration. Suspense rose as fleets and leaders attempted to engage, testing boundaries, only to be redirected or outmaneuvered without violence. Every interaction was a psychological ballet, a demonstration of superiority tempered by ethics. Twists emerged when Vaalis uncovered the humans' broader intention. They did not seek dominion, nor wealth, nor tribute. Their goal was evaluation. Entire civilizations were being tested to determine if autonomy and survival could coexist with morality and intelligence. The humans' subtle interventions exposed arrogance, short-sightedness, and cruelty, forcing alien leaders to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. Vaalis realized that his career ambitions, the desire for recognition and authority, were insignificant compared to the weight of the truths humans revealed. He had to reconcile personal gain with the ethical imperative that humans embodied. As the human's presence intensified, suspense reached its peak during a demonstration over a volatile border system. Mara's fleet manipulated environmental hazards, orchestrated decoys, and guided local forces through morally complex decisions. Every choice had consequences. Every hesitation was measured. General Kate's forces faced dilemmas they were unprepared to handle: act aggressively and risk catastrophe, or follow restraint and preserve stability. The humans observed silently, letting outcomes unfold, teaching lessons in ethics, strategy, and humility. Vaalis's inner monologue reflected the emotional arc of the encounter. We have been so blinded by fear and legend that we fail to see the real lesson. Myths are not merely entertainment. They are mirrors, challenges, and warnings. Humans are alive, and their power is in their restraint as much as their brilliance. The historian understood that documenting this moment was not just was a moral responsibility. The galaxy needed to witness not just the humans' capabilities, but their philosophy, their approach to power, and their ethical framework. The humans' influence culminated in a final act of subtle authority. Mara guided a complex resolution to a potential conflict between rival factions without firing a shot. Ships moved in synchrony, tactics unfolded with precision, and moral dilemmas were resolved through insight rather than destruction. The display left observers stunned. Citizens, scholars, and soldiers alike recognized that myths were not just stories, they were warnings, templates for understanding intelligence, morality, and responsibility. Vaalis watched, humbled and awed, as the humans' fleet withdrew into the void. Their presence lingered in the minds of all who witnessed them, a silent lesson in strategy, morality, and restraint. The historian whispered to himself, a mixture of wonder and realization. Legends are not lies. They are guides. Humans were never gone. They were watching, waiting, teaching. The stars themselves seemed to reflect the weight of this revelation, a tapestry of light and shadow, myth and reality intertwined as the camera would drift outward, past planetary cities, defensive satellites, and the silent observers of the galactic stage. The human fleet shimmered like constellations aligned with purpose, reminding all who looked on that legends could return. And when they did, they were not idle tales. They were standards, tests, and warnings that demanded both respect and reflection. The galaxy had glimpsed humanity, and in that glimpse, it had discovered that myths, once realized, could redefine morality, strategy, and the very understanding of existence itself. The senses had detected nothing. Silence, empty space stretched in all directions, glittering with distant stars, asteroid belts, and the faint hum of engines from scattered alien patrols. Scout Officer Rin's hands trembled slightly over her console. Something about this stillness felt wrong, unnatural. Her eyes darted from one display to another, each reading confirming emptiness. "It's a trap," she whispered, though the words sounded feeble even to her own ears. She could almost hear her heartbeat over the hum of the ship. Fleet Commander Tyron Human stood behind her, calm as ever. He observed the alien scouts with a patient intensity, his gaze unblinking. He said nothing, and that silence was louder than any alarm. Rin had been trained to expect chaos, explosions, frantic warnings, but Tyron's quiet confidence unnerved her far more. His mind was calculating, waiting, anticipating not for a fight, but for the precise moment when every pawn, every adversary, would reveal their true nature. And then they appeared. Hundreds of ships, blinking into existence from the void, as if conjured from thin air. The human fleet moved with silent precision, phasing between asteroid belts and nebulae, emerging like ghosts. Every vessel was in formation, synchronized perfectly, yet invisible until the moment they chose to be seen. The aliens froze, disbelief etched on every face. This cannot be real, Rin thought. Her breath caught in her throat. The silent Armada was not a myth. It was here, in full, and it was nothing like anyone had expected. The first moments were tense. No warnings, no ultimatums, only presence. The aliens' fleets hesitated, unsure whether to attack, to retreat, or to communicate. Tyron's voice finally cut through the tension, calm, almost conversational. "Do nothing. For now, let them see themselves." The humans' tactics were unlike anything Rin had encountered. Ships phased in and out of view, slipping behind asteroid cover, appearing and vanishing as though mocking detection. Every move the alien fleets made was anticipated. Every attempt to engage was neutralized before it could even begin. The suspense was almost unbearable. Tension thickened the air in the observation chambers, making breaths shallow, hearts pound, and minds race. The silent armada was not here to destroy, it was here to teach a lesson. Rin's inner monologue spiraled. We are the hunters. Or are we the prey? Every instinct screams attack, yet every outcome is carefully controlled. How can a fleet this size operate without revealing its true strength? She caught herself shivering, though Tyron remained serene, a pillar of quiet authority. Amidst chaos, it became painfully clear the humans had turned patience into a weapon, observation into power, and restraint into strategy. Alien Admiral Shaika's arrogance proved costly. He ordered volleys of plasma, confident that numbers alone would overwhelm. Yet the humans had anticipated every trajectory, every velocity, every prediction. Their shields adjusted dynamically. Decoy drones mimicked ships, luring Shakar's vessels into false engagements. No human ship fired a destructive shot. None needed to. The illusion of power was sufficient to dismantle overconfidence, leaving the alien fleet scattered and vulnerable. Tyron's calm was almost maddening. Notice how they don't strike immediately, he said to Rin, as if reading her thoughts. Notice how they let fear control their actions. That's the lesson. He gestured toward the holographic displays, showing alien ships by gravitational anomalies, immobilized without a single blow. Humans taught through anticipation, manipulation, and the subtle orchestration of outcomes. Force was secondary. Morality, patience, and precision were paramount. The emotional arc of the encounter was as striking as the tactics. Fear, disbelief, admiration, and awe rippled through every alien crew. They had assumed humans were extinct, a myth to frighten children. Now, that myth had returned not with brute aggression, but with cold, deliberate authority. Every officer, every pilot, felt the humbling weight of human ingenuity. Suspense built with each silent maneuver. Every blink of a human ship was a heartbeat in the galaxy, measured and controlled. Rin, despite her fear, began to understand the human's message. The silent armada was not a fleet for conquest. Cliff was a mirror, reflecting arrogance, impatience, and impulsiveness. The humans' silence taught as much as their strategy. Every alien fleet that underestimated them was shown the consequences of assumption. The moral lesson was clear. Humility was as powerful as firepower. An observation could be more deadly than aggression. The climax arrived in a tense standoff near the edge of a dense nebula. Hundreds of human ships phased in and out, forming formations that defied prediction. Alien ships, once confident, now drifted helplessly, unable to engage without falling into traps. Shakar realized too late that his arrogance had blinded him. Tyron's fleet moved with uncanny precision, guiding outcomes without firing a single destructive shot. It was psychological warfare elevated to utter demonstration of restraint, intellect, and moral authority. Rin felt her perspective shift. Entirely, she had been trained to measure success in firepower, in destroyed ships, in decisive kills. Now, she saw a different kind of victory. Patience, observation, calculated restraint, and moral clarity. The humans demonstrated that the true strength of a species was not in dominance alone, but in the ability to wield influence responsibly, ethically, and effectively. Finally, the humans revealed the subtle twist that defined the encounter. They allowed Zylar and his fleet to withdraw, unharmed but thoroughly humbled. No destruction, no slaughter, only the lesson of perspective. Tyron's calm voice echoed across the comms. Strength is not what you hold in your hands. Strength is what you choose to do with it. Alien crews, shaken to their core, stared at the disappearing fleet. A constellation of deliberate brilliance retreating into the void. The final moments lingered on Rin's face, as awe replaced fear. The silent armada had demonstrated the essence of humanity, patience, ingenuity, and moral authority. It was a reminder that myths were not stories, they were challenges, tests, and standards. The galaxy had glimpsed what humans could do without aggression, and the lesson was seared into every mind present. To underestimate a legend was to invite humility. As the camera would drift outward, past asteroid belts, drifting alien fleets, and glowing nebulae, the human ships shimmered like stars aligned with intent. A silent testament to restraint and calculated brilliance. The void itself seemed to pulse with the human's presence, an enduring reminder that myths, once realized, were not mere tales. They were measures by which all others would now be judged. And in the wake of the silent armada, every alien commander, officer, and citizen understood the simple, unshakable truth. Humans had returned, and the galaxy would never again view legends as harmless stories. For centuries, humans had vanished from the galaxy. Their colonies were abandoned, their technology scattered and half understood, their legends whispered as bedtime stories or cautionary tales. Alien scientists had studied what remained fragments of biotech, scattered AI cores, and incomplete star charts trying to piece together the civilization that had once reshaped entire star systems. Dr. Ilyra was among them. Methodical and analytical, cataloging each relic, simulating its potential, theorizing how humans had once used such advanced technology. Beside her, Sivak was cautious, skeptical, deeply aware of the ethical implications. The humans had disappeared for a reason, and probing too deeply felt like trespassing into something sacred. Then the fleet arrived. It was not heralded by alarms or dramatic flair. One moment the deep space lab floated in quiet observation. The next, shimmering human vessels appeared on the sensors, materializing in synchronized precision. They phased through gravitational anomalies, emerging from hyperjump corridors as if the void itself were bending to their will. Lya's first instinct was disbelief. It can't be. After centuries, she whispered, staring at the holographic display. Sivak's hand hovered over the emergency protocols, ready for the worst, yet instinctively restrained. The humans did not fire. They did not communicate. They simply observed. Captain Elian's flagship moved, with deliberate calm, silent sentinel among the stars. Unlike most humans imagined in myths, he was not a conqueror, not a warlord. He was an experimenter of a different kind of teacher, a test giver, a reminder of responsibility. Every vessel in his fleet was coordinated with surgical precision, yet there was no aggressive posturing, only presence. The suspense in the alien labs grew unbearable as Ilyra and Sivak struggled to comprehend what this meant. Humans were back, not to reclaim the galaxy, but to judge it, to observe the moral and ethical choices of civilizations that had grown in their absence. The first demonstration was subtle, almost imperceptible. Satellites previously thought inactive, flickered with life, manipulated by human AI that adjusted their trajectories with uncanny precision. Environmental systems on derelict colonies stabilized temporarily, as if humans were showing their mastery over not just technology, but ecosystems. Ilyra realized the lesson immediately. Humans were demonstrating capability without aggression, influence without coercion. They were testing, not attacking. The suspense was layered. Every adjustment carried both awe and ethical weight. Sivak remained skeptical, analyzing every movement, every reading. Why return now? Why reveal themselves in this way? Are they experimenting with us? Her voice trembled with both fear and fascination. The humans' actions were almost surgical, highlighting potential failures, exploiting inefficiencies in infrastructure, strategy, and morality, not to punish, but to observe responses. Elian's calm voice finally resonated across the comms, not as a command, but as an echo of principle. We observe to understand. We intervene only when the choice reflects harm or ignorance. Your actions will be the measure of your civilization. The alien scientists were forced to confront ethical dilemmas they had never considered. Their simulations and experiments, designed to extract human technology and reverse engineer it, were now being scrutinized in real time. Every attempt to exploit a human relic, every thought of manipulating technology for personal gain, was met with subtle countermeasures. Drones would disable invasive probes. AI cores would reroute themselves. Environmental controls would adjust to reveal vulnerabilities without destroying systems. Humans were forcing introspection, teaching without words, asserting moral authority in silence. The suspense escalated when a derelict colony activated fully, showing the aliens the potential consequences of misuse. Ilyra watched as human AI projected holographic simulations of entire civilizations collapsing under exploitation or negligence. Ships, cities, ecosystems, all were visualized in terrifying clarity. Humans did not destroy, yet the projection was undeniable. Choices mattered. Every action had consequences. Civic skepticism faltered under the weight of evidence. The lesson was unambiguous. Humans had mastered ethics, technology, and foresight to a degree the galaxy could scarcely comprehend. Captain Elian orchestrated the climax of the demonstration with precision. Fleets moved in choreographed patterns, highlighting strategic vulnerabilities in alien networks. Biotech systems, long thought inert, were manipulated to create temporary environmental hazards, forcing alien scientists to make ethical decisions. Quickly, each choice revealed priorities, biases, and morality. No lives were lost, yet the emotional impact was profound. Fear, admiration, and a deep moral reckoning swept through every observer. Ilyra and Sivak were confronted not just with the capabilities of humans, but with the responsibilities that came with knowledge and power. The twist became evident when Elion revealed the humans' intent. They had allowed themselves to be observed, to test alien ethical limits. Every calculated move was a moral experiment, a challenge to see whether civilizations could wield power responsibly. Ilyra's inner monologue reflected the weight of this realization. We were not being tested for our ability to extract technology, or to conquer, or to survive. We were being measured for our understanding, our restraint, and our capacity to act ethically under pressure. Suspense turned into reflection. Transformed into self-examination. Humans offered a choice. Through deliberate signaling and measured interaction, they presented the aliens with two options: coexistence or resistance. The choice was moral, not tactical. The implications were staggering. Galaxies could be reshaped, not through conquest, but through ethical decisions, through the alignment of power and principle. Ilyra and Sivak debated furiously, aware that the ramifications extended far beyond themselves. Every system, every population, every leader would be forced to confront the same dilemma. In the final moments, the human fleet withdrew into the void, leaving the alien scientists to reflect on what they had witnessed. Ilyra whispered to herself, her voice trembling. They returned not to dominate, but to teach, to test, to awaken responsibility. Sivak nodded silently, her skepticism replaced by a cautious optimism. The lesson was clear. Humanity's strength lay not only in technology or strategy, but in morality, restraint, and the courage to observe without interference. As the camera drifted outward, past the labs, derelict colonies, and holographic projections, the human fleet shimmered like aligned constellations, a silent testament to the ethical and technological heights a civilization could reach. The void itself seemed charged with the weight of human return, an enduring reminder that survival was not measured solely by firepower, but by wisdom, restraint, and ethical action. The galaxy had glimpsed humanity, and in that glimpse, it had discovered a civilization that judged not by destruction, but by the moral choices it inspired. The legacy of the last experiment was profound. Every alien system would remember the lesson. Every scientist, commander, and citizen would feel its echo. Humans had returned, and the galaxy's understanding of power, morality, and responsibility would never be the same. Myths had come alive, not as conquerors, but as teachers. And in that quiet, deliberate presence, the future of countless civilizations had been forever altered. On the peaceful world of Endor, alien children laughed beneath the twin moons, playing games and weaving tales. Their stories were filled with humans, gigantic, brilliant, unstoppable beings whose deeds had long since been mythologized to the children. Humans were heroes of imagination, creatures of impossible cunning and strength, figures to inspire courage and caution. Adults nodded at these tales, but dismissed them as fanciful exaggerations. Bedtime entertainment meant to cultivate imagination, yet in the eyes of the young, humans were alive, always present in shadow and story. Lena, a human ambassador, observed, from orbit, invisible to the casual gaze. Her ship floated silently among Erendor's moons, a shadow blending with cosmic dust. She watched the children, their eyes wide with wonder, their laughter echoing faintly across communications that only she could perceive. Humans had long learned the value of subtlety, of teaching without overt display. Lena understood that myths were not merely tallies. They were tools, instruments of education and moral guidance. And tonight, those myths were about to manifest. Commander Prax, tasked with planetary security, paced impatiently, his brow furrowed as he scanned for anomalies, dismissing the children's chatter about humans as harmless fantasy. Legends, he muttered, stories to keep them obedient. But instinct gnawed at him, a subtle unease he could not shake. The stars themselves seemed different tonight, as if something ancient and deliberate was approaching. Prax's skepticism collided with an inexplicable fear, and he could not explain why his instincts screamed of imminent presence. Then, slowly, deliberately, the human fleet appeared. Not in overwhelming firepower, not as conquerors, but like constellations, aligning in the night sky. Ships blinked into existence above the planet, synchronized, precise, yet silent. They were visible to the children, first teeny eyes widening in awe, as the myths they had imagined manifested before them. Lena guided the fleet with subtle maneuvers, ensuring visibility without intimidation, presence without aggression. The humans' goal was not dominance. It was understanding, teaching, shaping moral growth through demonstration, rather than destruction. Suspense, built as Hrax scrambled his sensors. Alien military vessels attempted to engage, to scan, to assert authority, but the humans remained just beyond the reach of detection systems, phasing in and out, revealing only what they chose. Chilton pointed excitedly at the sky, shouting names of heroes and legendary deeds, unaware that the myths were not merely stories, but reflections of reality. Lena smiled, recognizing the power of legend as a tool of both inspiration and subtle influence. The humans' approach was meticulous. They orchestrated challenges without harm, displaying ingenuity, strategy, and ethics that alien observers could scarcely comprehend. Trade disputes, territorial disagreements, and environmental hazards on Erendor were guided gently, corrected where mistakes could lead to catastrophe. Commander Hax found himself outmaneuvered, not by weapons, but by understanding the humans. Anticipated responses, nudged decisions, and revealed flaws without conflict. Suspense deepened as every attempt at intervention by the alien military was subtly countered, exposing impatience, arrogance, and short-sightedness. The emotional arc for the children was vivid. They cheered as ships aligned and maneuvered in patterns that mimicked constellations, witnessing the myths they had imagined come alive. The awe and wonder on their faces contrasted sharply with the frustration, fear, and astonishment of the adults. Humans were teaching lessons not through intimidation, but through presence and ingenuity, demonstrating the balance between power and responsibility. Lena understood the subtle humor in watching adults squirm under the weight of lessons that children had already internalized through story. Twists arose when it became clear that human influence extended beyond mere observation. Civilians were guided away from potentially catastrophic mistakes. Technological errors were corrected before they escalated, and social conflicts were resolved without coercion. The humans' display of moral restraint forced the alien population to confront assumptions they had long held about power, ethics, and authority. Myths had become active agents, shaping outcomes in ways that textbooks, laws, or leaders could never achieve. Lena's interactions were precise and deliberate. She engaged with key figures through encrypted transmissions and indirect signals, nudging them towards self-realization. Commander Frax, initially skeptical, began to recognize the ethical tests embedded in the humans' interventions. Each challenge was designed to provoke reflection rather than submission. The humans revealed that their presence had always been closer than anyone imagined. Legends were warnings, guides, and reflections of reality. Humans had never truly been absent, only observing, waiting for the right moment to shape outcomes. The climax unfolded as a minor conflict between two rival factions threatened to escalate. The humans orchestrated environmental shifts and strategic demonstrations that forced leaders to confront moral choices. Every decision carried consequences, yet the humans ensured that no lives were lost. Prax, forced to follow human guidance, made a choice that balanced prudence with courage, realizing the importance of foresight and restraint. The children watched, silently absorbing the lesson embedded in the unfolding events, their myths now alive in tangible, ethical challenges. The twist revealed itself fully in the aftermath. Humans departed quietly, leaving behind systems stabilized, conflicts resolved, and leaders morally tested. The children, wide-eyed and joyous, understood instinctively that their legends had been real. The adults, humbled and reflective, faced a moral reckoning. They had dismissed stories as fantasy, only to discover that myths had always carried truth. Lena's fleet receded into the void, a silent constellation of morality, ingenuity, and restraint, leaving the planet forever changed. The emotional resonance lingered. Fear, AEW, respect, and wonder interwove across Erendor's population. Lessons had been delivered without violence, without domination, and yet with complete clarity. Myths, when realized, had the power to shape civilizations, instill ethical understanding, and elevate the next generation. Children's games now carried weight. Stories were no longer entertainment. They were reflections of real principles, living reminders that humans, the legends, had always been teachers, as much as warriors. As the camera drifted outward, past Erendor's forests, moons, and orbiting satellites, the human ships shimmered against the backdrop of the galaxy like constellations moving with intent. The void itself seemed charged with purpose, a silent testament to the ethical and strategic heights humanity could reach. Every observer, child, adult, scientist, or soldier, understood that myths were never idle stories. Humans had returned, and the galaxy had glimpsed not just their brilliance, but the moral compass that guided it. In the quiet aftermath, children whispered of the humans in awe, inventing new stories based on what they had witnessed. Adults, reflective and humbled, shared accounts of ethical lessons learned, realizing that the greatest power a species could wield was not destruction, but wisdom, ingenuity, and moral clarity. Lena, observing silently, knew that the seeds planted that night would grow for generations, lessons embedded in myths, now proven true, shaping the galaxy in ways far more profound than any fleet of weapons could achieve.